I watch it spin till it stops spinning. That's what I do. All right, y'all, whoever y'all is, if anybody's out there, welcome to the Bunker Nation Show. My name is Michael Bunker. I'm going to be your host for the evening. Depending on if we have a show, we'll see. We'll see if anybody shows up. If you are here, make sure you type your name into the comment section. I don't really need to know your name. Just type into the comment section, hello, say howdy, tell me where you are, whatever else. Tell me if the volume's working. Tell me if the video's working. Just let me know what's going on out there so I know. In the meantime, I'm going to do this box because the box is critical to the success and forward motion of the show. Bam! Box blew up. All right, so it's hotter than the blazes. It's going to get hotter. Had a rain again yesterday, rain 2 days ago, and the temperatures have not gone down any, so you can see I'm dripping wet, and I'm like I just climbed out of a swimming pool. Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate it. And it's not going to get any better. Humidity is through the roof, and it's hot. It's supposed to be 105 by this weekend, so you may not see me much. I don't get on here when it's that hot. I don't have air conditioning. I don't have a fan. And so I'm here for you. The only reason I'm here right now and not sitting in my hammock is because we're in difficult times, and I think people might, you never know. They may need someone to talk to. Maybe they need somebody to hear them. Got a wasp. Probably going to be buzzing me here in a minute. All right, so let me know if you're out there. Smash the like button. The like button is the way that you let YouTube know that you'd like more people to be seeing these videos. We've been doing a video, I don't know, 3 to 5 videos a week at least, maybe 5. Going back to the very beginning of the thing that we're not supposed to talk about, the disease that goes without mention. Hello, Mississippi. Hello, Montana. If you're out there, type into the comments section. Let me know where you are. And I'm doing it for you. I'm not doing it for me. My fans all run on Ryobi batteries, and until I go get the batteries, the new batteries for the solar trailer, I have no way to charge the Ryobi battery. 100% of my power. Okay, I have the Gold Zero 100-watt panel that goes to charge the Yeti 400, which is what I'm using right now to have internet and to have this. 100% of any power that I have during the day, which is not much because my batteries are dead, goes for me trying to get some work done during the day. Hello, Prosper, Texas. I thought I would do some history. So that's what I might do today. Talk a little bit about history, kind of use history to shine a light, to illuminate where we are, why things are happening the way they're happening. Maybe even some things that have happened to you, maybe some things that have skewed your thinking, perhaps things that are going to make you mad. Who knows? I really ought to open these up with a big warning. A lot of times what I'm going to do on these shows, if you haven't noticed, is I'm just going to say the facts. And facts really, really, really piss people off in a post-fact world. And a lot of times it's not their fault. Maybe it is, but it's just because they don't know any better and they think that they've been taught to think screwy. So they think if you ever say anything, that's offensive to them, even if it's the truth, and even if it's not meant to be offensive, it's just somebody stating a fact, that it's a personal attack. And so my emails are constantly full of people who are offended because if I do, let's just say, 5 of these shows a week, that's something like 21, 22 shows a month. That's something like 250, 270 shows a year. If I did that, what's the possibility somebody's going to hit something that pisses them off? Probably 100% within the first couple of shows. And so what I try to do in conjunction with telling people facts and history and all that is I try to teach them how to think so that they're not offended. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I thought today what I would do is talk a little bit about wealth. This confuses people, especially when it comes to me. because I have my own problems with wealthy people. I do not believe whatsoever that rich people are all got there because they worked hard and they just bootstrapped themselves up to wealth, and now it's some kind of inviolate thing where they're supposed to be like a higher class of people and get treated differently under the law. So those things, that's something I don't believe. I don't believe that everybody in fact, I believe that most people you meet out there that are wealthy are accidentally wealthy. They inherited it or they got it because some accident of the way things happened where they ended up getting a certain job and the people who hired them were dumb enough to keep them in that job long enough that they got vested or whatever. Who knows? What do you consider wealthy? That's a great question because historically wealth was quantified differently than it is today. Historically, I'm the rich one. Historically, not people living in a big house that's all mortgaged and they got a mortgage cards and all that kind of stuff. Those people would not have been considered wealthy. I would be considered wealthy because I have land, I have animals, I have grass coming up every year, I have regenerative wealth, wealth that comes up from the ground every year. I don't have to do anything. What they call today passive income. So, but in this world, because this world requires cash on the barrelhead and requires things that of me that are forced on me, the manner of travel, the expenses involved in that, things that I would not prefer and I wouldn't choose and I ought to be able to bypass, but I can't. And all of those things incur cost, and cost for the most part in this world are cash based. So I can't actually like go down to the insurance USAA and say, hey, I'm going to send you 4 dozen eggs, 5 dozen eggs a week. I can't do that. They want cash money. And so in order to get cash money, I have to do other things that cause other things. So then I got to pay more expenses. It's part of the treadmill that average Westerners are on. So what do I consider wealthy? I think wealthy is, first of all, that you have zero concern about debt. I don't have any debt. I have some debt, but it's all personal debt. It's not systemic debt. And I think wealthy also means that whatever it is you need, whatever it is you run into, whatever it is coming at you around the corner, financially, it's not a concern for you. Now, the problem is that some very, 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 very wealthy people would consider themselves under that definition to not be wealthy because they worry and because they have fear and because perhaps they've done some things that are not particularly altogether wise, and perhaps they've got themselves in certain amount of leveraged debt or whatever. They consider themselves to be poor. There was a study that was done recently. I read it. I think I talked about it here in one of the shows, where they polled people. I've never been polled, just to let you know, but they polled a bunch of wealthy people, and they asked them at what level, at what income level, would they consider themselves wealthy. And if I remember right, the amount was $11 million a year. So everybody below that does not consider themselves wealthy. And if you think about it in the way that you see, when I say if you think about it, most people think, well, okay, I'm going to think about it with my brain and my experience and my situation, and I'm going to compare it. It's not what I'm asking you to do. If you think about it from their point of view, if you have enough empathy to be able to understand somebody else's point of view, it takes about $11 million a year for you to be able to just live off of that interest in the in the way that people like that are accustomed to living. In other words, to maintain the custom of living as somebody who makes $11 million a year, right? So if you took, say you make $11 million a year, say you take home 5.5, say you take home 5. You take that $5 million a year and you put it in some investment making 4% a year. I don't know, man. That means that you're making like maybe 200 grand, I think is right, on that money. So if you don't touch the principal and you decided you wanted to live off the interest, you would be only living off $200,000 a year. I say only. $200,000 a year would be a crap ton of money to me. The people who are on welfare right now, or excuse me, who are on unemployment, that are getting $600 extra a week, I could live better than I live now on the 600. Forget whatever they're getting from the state and everything else. So we all have different definitions of wealth is. I'm just saying, this is the way these people look at money. This is not my point, but this is how people look at money. When I talk about things like this, and then I start talking about it historically, I have to ask you to divorce yourself from your own biases, from your own historical ignorance, from your own Dunning-Kruger, from your own way of thinking of things, and perhaps think that there's another way to think about things. Historically, wealth was land, cattle. Cattle just meant movable property. That's where we get the word cattle from chattel, which means movable property. So land, cattle, sons and daughters, those things were wealth, right? A good wife, a good husband, wealth. Health was wealth. If you had land and you had movable property, and you had a family and you had a good spouse, you were rich. And there wasn't all that much more required. There was responsibilities that I'm going to get to, but you were wealthy. And the reason why, no problem, Daniel. The reason why is because wealth is under the hand of a sovereign God, and it comes up from the ground. The only place that produces reusable, sustainable wealth. It comes up out of the ground every year, primarily in the form of grass. So if you had property that produced grass and you had animals to eat the grass, you could multiply the animals. You could sell off or trade off to get everything that you needed, and you had the original animals and you had some of the offspring, and you could constantly rotate them, and you had renewable passive income. Doesn't mean you didn't have to work, just meant that, you know, it would continue to renew every year, year by year, month by month, according to the Lord's great grace and sovereign mercy. Now, what happened is the people that were wealthy in this way, outside of Israel, if you were in Israel, you could increase your land holdings for 6-7 years, but then you had to give, or however many years, and then you had to give it back. Because they had the land Sabbath, then they had the Sabbath years, and then they had the Jubilee. At the end of the Jubilee, everything had to go back. You couldn't acquire a bunch of land that belonged to another tribe, for example. All that had to go back. Anywhere else you lived, you could increase, if you had the ability to hold it, which means defend it. You could, if you owned property, you could increase that land holding. You could increase your wealth, and from that, you could create what's called generational wealth, which is a system that becomes self-fulfilling, that provides for itself. You could hand that off to your offspring. According to the law, this was usually the oldest male, although it could go to a female if there wasn't an older male, or different things happen. And so we had what was called generational wealth. From generational wealth developed the idea of noblesse oblige, the obligations or the duties of the nobility. Now, nobility had a couple of different definitions. Primarily, in the term noblesse oblige, just meant those who who had land, who had people working for them, had obligations towards the society and the culture and everything. Nobility in the sense of England and Western Europe and Russia was either handed down through your family because you were somehow related to the king, or like in Russia, the czar could create somebody into a noble. They could call that you could become a prince, and then your child could become a count or something like that, like Tolstoy. And so the thing is, and it's become a joke because modern Marxists have to destroy the idea of any form of generational wealth because they want to steal it all, they want to consume it all, and they want to distribute it according to their own power structure. And so in doing so, they've taken over the last 50 to 100 years these terms like aristocracy and noblesse oblige, and they've turned them into bad things. They turn them into things that are a joke. So noblesse oblige. Now, first of all, you got to remember what every revolutionary system does is it has to condemn, morally, philosophically condemn whatever came before. What it does not do is it doesn't admit that the condemnation of that system is generally condemning the results of the changes that those same people forced on that system prior to its collapse. So what happens is, like in Russia, is you had a system that worked very, very well, although there was obviously, if we look at it from today's standards, there was obviously wealth inequality, and there was obviously people who had power and people who didn't. However, it worked really, really well for the stability of the empire. It worked really, really well for the greatest amount of happiness and wealth for the most amount of people. In that way, it was very utilitarian. It also was very stable, and it allowed, and it still had a way for people who happened to be remarkable in some way to advance. Most people didn't, but you could if you were remarkable in some way. All right. And what happened is those systems go on for 1,000 years, right? Because they're stable. Eventually, the level of wealth, the universal level of wealth in that empire or whatever, reaches a point where the next generations don't have to do any work. Their education has changed, so they're not taught the things that it took to build that civilization, but they're taught to hate those things. And so a generation arises that knows not Joseph. That generation makes demands on the system, threatens the system, and the system caves into those threats for years, allowing things that themselves are seeds of the destruction of that system. So the Russians sent their children to Eastern Europe, to Germany, to be educated, where they learned Marxism, and they learned communism, and they learned revolution, and they learned all of these things. They learned a lot of lies about how wealth comes into being and what it is and all of these things. And then those people came back. They forced changes in the system. Some of those changes, which would have happened naturally and were happening naturally, they were railroaded through. Those changes create weakness in the system because you had a stable system, and basically you started taking an axe to the roots of it. All right? So then that system begins to crumble. Then the same revolutionaries point at that and go, see, this system is corrupt, this system is broken, this system is horrible, we got to get rid of it. And then they take over and everybody dies. You get about 60 or 70 years after that, and enough people have died that people overthrow them and try to reform. All right. So before that, what they did is they demonized terms like noblesse oblige. Noblesse oblige, which is the obligations or the responsibilities of the nobility, said that if you were a landowner, if you were a noble, if you were somebody who was wealthy, generationally wealthy, you had an absolute obligation, not only to the people directly under you, the people who worked for you, the people who were slaves, the people who were serfs, the people, whoever they were, to biblically protect their life and their liberty as far as they had it, and to protect their rights and to judge justice fairly. And you had that obligation, and the rest of the society worked together through shame and punishment and judges to make sure that people who abused those who were under them or who were under them in the system were themselves punished and perhaps even stripped of property and titles, etc. I'm saying this, and the communists out there are laughing out loud. They're saying that never happened. Well, that's because they've been trained to think about the latter days of aristocracy, the latter days of nobility, after they themselves have inculcated changes that have created problems and destruction within the system. All right, so where's all this going? Hopefully you've seen some parallels. Well, let me draw you a good metaphor. You know what I think about a stupid colony on Mars? Well, let's just say it happened. Stupid colony gets built on Mars. It's up there, and they build a big bubble city, and they're able to make it, geoforming or whatever it takes to grow some crops and create oxygen. They create a civilization, right? Because of the order that type of system would take, it would have to be a somewhat despotic, totalitarian system. You can't have people just going off and going, I don't want to do this anymore, and opening the door and letting all the air out and everybody dies. You'd have to have some pretty strict laws, and the people who generally want a Martian colony are generally totalitarians intellectually anyway. And so we create this colony. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it expands, and it's successful because it has a lot of order. Perhaps it has a system where people can work and they can move their way up and they can get some land, and then their family can inherit it. They can expand it. They can hire people, new colonists that are coming in. They can pay them. Those people work for 7 years. They get their own plot of land. Some system like that. And let's say it works. Let's say it works for 1,000 years. Hello. About 900 years into it, you've created so much wealth, so much Martian wealth. So many people are so comfortable. So many people have things. Hello, Ron and Ravonda. That their children, like ours, are bored. They learn to stack cups on videos, and they learn to throw their water bottle and have it land, and they do it 5,000 times an hour until they get so good at it, it's incredible, and they go on TikTok. A whole generation rises up, and they know how to jump up in the air and spin around on their bikes without ever touching the pegs, and then they know how to do crazy things. They have so many good singers that you could swing a dead cat in any room of people, and you can find somebody who sings exactly like Patsy Cline. You can find somebody who sings exactly like George Strait, just as good as the best that there ever were. But there's millions of them because they've had so much free time. They've never had to survive, that they're able to take lessons and learn instruments, and they can become extremely talented at the most mundane and weird things. That talent is an overflowing fountain, and yet they're bored. They don't respect their parents. They don't understand one thing about what it took to build it all. The 1,000 years it took for it all to work, so that even the lowest, poorest people were actually wealthy in historical sense. And so that generation rises up and says, "We're done with it. We're ending the Martiocracy." And they make a plan, and they're going to blow up the oxygen factory, and they're going to blow out the doors, and they're going to remove the domes, and they're going to do all this stuff. And some guy like me, He's on his little Martian YouTube show, and he says, hey, if you blow up the oxygen, everybody's going to die. If you blow up the bubbles that hold the oxygen, everybody's going to die. And they're like, Martiocracy. Off with his head. All right. So where did wealth get a bad name? Where did wealth become evil? Wealth became evil when the first generation of spoiled offspring were not taught and did not come to any conclusion about how they were going to live. All right? Or how they got to live that way. And so the whole thing began to come apart. What they did is they then saw their parents as being as unproductive as they are. Because everything, when you become a narcissist in a sociopathic society, everything is measured against you. So they looked at their parents and they said, well, my parents are just as unproductive as I am. Because of that system, those children rose up to places of power, or they started companies, or they got jobs, and they became wealthy, and they became wastrels. They abandoned noblesse oblige. They abused, because they respected nothing but themselves. They abused their offspring and everything else. They abused their lowerlings or anybody else who worked for them, village people, not the village people, YMCA, you know. The next generation saw their grandparents as worthless and their parents as destroying thieves who did not respect anything but worked for themselves, robbed, stole whatever it took. And they see this moral decay and they say, this is a problem that has existed forever. And then their creative propaganda mills they tear down statues and all this kind of stuff. So this is how it happens. Wealth in and of itself is not an evil. Wealth in and of itself, in a system where there is a morality and there is a biblical sense of responsibility, would engage the wealthy person in obligations, regardless of Ayn Rand or any of that kind of stuff. I got rid of that Randian objectivist philosophy as soon as I realized that they were unobjective when it came to any concept of God. And so that's where we are. Hopefully you can see the parallels. Wealth in and of itself is not the problem. But the people who want change, the people who are out there screaming Black Lives Matter, Black lives do matter. The organization Black Lives Matter is a Marxist communist organization that wants to destroy the family and destroy the system. They want to blow up the oxygen factory and blow up the oxygen bubble, and everybody will die. Maybe not in 5 minutes, but they'll die. So that's where we are. Hey, by the way, speaking of everybody dying, we're getting really close to the launch of God in the Storm. The book I wrote with Sophic Sean Tulin about the Cambodian genocide in 1975 to 1979. And it's a fantastic book. I think you're going to love, I say myself. If you like my books, if you like Pennsylvania, if you like Brother Frank, you're going to love this book. I think you're going to find it exciting, illustrative, historically relevant. You can go right now to God in the Storm. Let me pull it up here. That's not it. GodInTheStorm.com, and you can pre-order. The ebook should be available like really soon, like the next day or so. We pushed up all the files have all gone to Sean. He's pushing those up today or tomorrow. Ebook samples, paperback samples will be out here pretty quickly, and then we'll be mailing signed books. So, hey, go to God in the Storm and check that out. It's a lot about what I'm talking about and what actually happened in a real country where these people, the black pajamas, came into power. Do you think wealth in America became evil when just a few people held all the wealth? Rockefeller Vanderbilt. Okay, it didn't become evil. The evil tendency that the system, because the system was already devolving, right? So the evil tendency of the system allowed evil men to do evil things. While it's true that poor people worked and lived under bad conditions, those conditions were primarily a systemic problem that was caused by the end of agrarianism and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So most people had or were forced to give up their land and move to the cities where they could be enslaved by people like Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, and other people. Look at the history of New York City. There's a great documentary on PBS about it. So long as people were attached to the land, and I don't mean attached in a slavery sense. I mean they had land and they were morally and philosophically attached to it. Those abuses of wealth didn't generally occur until late stage. They're late stage result of the offspring and the grand offspring becoming corrupted. In America in particular, when America was shortly after the Revolution, before the War of 1812, America had the largest percentage of upper middle class farmers, which would be considered very wealthy today, owned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres. Slavery itself was rare. It existed and it was horrible, but it was rare. And the main reason was because most people who came over here were not wealthy. They did not own slaves. They were working to purchase some land and to build their own, and they became independent gentlemen farmers. This is all in my book, by the way, Surviving Off-Grid. Well, thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. I love Georgia, and thank you for being here. So wealth is a tricky subject because inevitably the abuses of capitalism or aristocracy or nobility are always drawn from the latest stages of that system. The earliest stages, when there is massive amount of wealth, where very, 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 very few people are poor, where there is the wealthiest are still basically considered the middle class because pretty much everybody is wealthy. That long period, which can last hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in a society, is always ignored. The wealth caused the modified slavery system that we all now enjoy. The wealth didn't cause it. Wealth doesn't cause anything. The love of it and the corruption of the system, which was the abandonment of agrarianism and the embracing of industrialism and the cult of efficiency, caused it. It is slavery, but it wasn't caused by wealth. Wealth in and of itself is not the problem. The problem is that we have abandoned God and abandoned the land from which wealth comes. That's how you become slaves. It was promised in the scripture. The reason that the Israelites were tied to the land, they were tied to it. They were given a birthright in laws, and they were not even allowed within 50 years to sell it and get away from it all, because then it would come back to their family. Because God knew they would blow it. Nature of sin and the depravity of man. All right, I'm here for your questions and comments. If you have anything you want to talk about. It is hot here. I am dripping with sweat. This is not an advertisement for Under Armour. This is a free shirt. Maybe I paid 50 cents or $1 for it from the thrift store. I wear what I have, and I'm not doing laundry right now. Hello, Cynthia. Glad you could be here. Anybody has any questions or comments, type them in. I'll be here for a few minutes at least, depending on you. We got some time, so if you got something you want to ask. Just trying to give everybody a little bit of perspective, because what happens in this later day when you have dumb people on both sides is that people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. For example, Daniel, I didn't publish the post you pasted or posted that I went through all the foundation of all those terms, because half of them were wrong, maybe a fourth. A fourth of them were wrong, and I just wasn't going to go through and correct them all. Some of them were right and some of them were wrong. It was interesting. But one of those terms was the baby with the bathwater. Oh, choosing slavery has a long history. The slavery comes from the fact that you don't have, at some point, you don't have a legitimate alternative. In other words, when the system gets to the point where it requires so much of you that you can't not have a job. I mean, you can live like me without air conditioning, have your own land, have your own animals and all that, and live rough. I mean, rough. And you don't have to have a job. You may not be able to get on internet. Maybe you can't get on a cell phone. Maybe you can't pay the bill for those, but I don't need those things. I only need those to help you. But you cannot live where you live and not be wealthy and not have a job. So once we say have a job, what do we mean by that? That means there's a certain amount of nut that you have to hit. Everything that you do to maintain that incurs more expenses. So whether it's daycare, whether it's laundry, whether it's electricity to power your house and all these type of things. You got to read Henry and the Great Society. Read it. Slavery is a metaphorical term in this sense. What it means is that the system knows people ain't getting out of it. You can't just decide one day you're not going to do it anymore unless you have a plan. No problem with the typos. Advice I get from several multimillionaire friends I have is never get into debt. That's true. Purchase everything in cash, including real estate. That's true. That is the best way to maintain wealth. May not be the best way to get wealth. I think that some of those things could be quibbled with. There are definitely different opinions. Whether everything you have is paid for is immaterial, that's one thing. We're talking about a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen things. I am enslaved at some level. My slavery, the chains of my slavery is my my love, right? If I was a misanthrope, if I actually hated people and didn't care what happened to them, I would get rid of this laptop. I would not write books. I would not have internet. I would not have this electric light in my face. I would cut off all that stuff. I would throw my phone in the pond, and I would work minimally every day to have just enough to feed my animals, to feed my family, and to provide for us. I would expand in some areas, perhaps fabrics from my sheep. I have sheep. Perhaps I would expand some things that we don't actually do that we could do. But if I was a misanthrope, if I was an absolute narcissist, I certainly wouldn't be right here on this video when it's almost, I don't know what it is, feels like, but it's hot and I'm dripping with sweat and there's no air moving in Texas and Central Texas in the middle of the day. And the reason I wouldn't is because if we go back, and one of these days I'm going to pull it up. The last video that I did made 33 cents. So that's what I made for an hour. And not only that, but all the hours it takes to do all the other stuff. The video that I just did today that I put up on my Bunk Pit channel, by the way, Make sure you subscribe to the BunkFit channel. I put up a new video today. It's on Facebook. Facebook doesn't like to post my links, but there's a new video and it's talking about, it's the beginning of the BunkFit challenge, 3-month challenge. Go watch that video. It's on my Facebook, but you can also find it. Just type in on YouTube, just type in Michael Bunker BunkFit. It'll come up. All right. Just put up a new video today. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyways, I would not be doing any of this except that I believe that I can help people. And if somehow, in some way, it helps me continue to live this life, continue to live out here, then that's great. I don't know if it will or not. It's totally up to God. If you want tips on fabric from your sheep, let me know. I raise sheep and produce fabric. Wow. Excellent. I don't know. I'm 53 years old. I don't know if I'm going to get into that. I was using that as a example. If I was a misanthrope, I would cut off all the technology because that's 100% of the money that I need. I don't need money if I don't have outreach. In a capitalistic society like ours, Amy says, although we are heavily regulated, won't there always be income inequality? Absolutely. I've never advocated that there won't be. There absolutely should. You need income inequality. That's the only driver of productivity and creativity. You know, so there's always going to be income inequality, even in the best. The latter day corruption of corporatism, which is what we have today, is not just about income inequality. It's about a corrupt system where non-people, corporations working together with government entities, have captured the means of theft and graft and printing money, and they use it all to pay themselves. And so modern socialists want to eliminate that inequality, but it takes away our freedom. So can working taxpayers then decide to withhold taxes due? Absolutely, you can decide to do it. If millions did it, then change would be forced because no income for the government to spend. Would that work? Yes, it would work in a couple of different ways. First of all, you already have the choice not to pay taxes. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can not pay taxes that you actually owe, in which case they may come get you and put you in a jail. But you can do it. And when you're in the jail, you won't owe any taxes, and the system will be hurt thereby. If enough people did that, the system would collapse. The other way you could not pay taxes is the way that I've done it for 20 years, and that is don't make any money. All right? Which means perhaps it takes you a year, perhaps it takes you 5 years, but you procure some land, even if it's a quarter acre up to 5 acres or more, and you begin to produce from the land, and you don't make an income. You don't make an income. A tomato that grows in your land is not income. And so by not having income, you are not paying taxes on that income. By maximizing your ability to produce for yourself so that you don't need other things, then you are not creating an income, and then you're not paying taxes on it. Both of those ways are fine with me. If millions of people did it, would they be forced? I would say there's already millions of people. I think there's something like 80 million people a year who owe taxes who don't pay them. Could be way more than that. So, and what we are seeing is we already are seeing a system that spends more money than it takes in. So right now, in the current state of corporatism where we are, failed capitalism, is that the income side is not even considered. It doesn't matter how much money you make if you can print your own money and people keep taking it. It's when they stop taking it, then you have a problem. You have to work to make money. See, this is one of those sentences that you have to diagram because people have, it can be taken so many ways. It could be you have to work to make money. You have to work to make money, or you have to work to make money. There's so many ways I could take that. I don't know what you mean. First of all, you do not have to work to make money. There are millions and millions of people who do not work and make money. Second of all, you don't need to make money. You may want to make money, and if you have money, then you can spend it on things, but you don't have to have money, except in the situation you're in. Money is a fairly new concept. It's a fairly new concept. For thousands of years, money merely meant that which was a medium of exchange. Okay, so if I had 5 dozen eggs and you had a baby rabbit and I exchanged the 5 dozen eggs for the baby rabbit, there's no money involved. But what if you don't want eggs and you have a baby rabbit, but you want grapes? And Bill, he has grapes, he wants eggs, he doesn't want a baby rabbit. So we do a three-way trade. Still, none of that is money. When enough people get involved, then some guy says, hey, here's the deal. Well, you never know when you're going to want a rabbit. You never know when you're going to want grapes, but grapes are only available a certain time of the year. Bring me the grapes. I'm going to monetize them. I'm going to sell them early, and I'm going to put some piece of paper or a coin in your account that's going to say how much you have. That's when money came into it. So there's always been a medium of exchange, and governments often paid in some form of salary, which came from salt. But as far as the average person exchanging money, and it never, ever, ever, ever appearing as any of the things that it was originally based on, that's a really, 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 really new system. Isn't money needed to pay property tax? Yes. If you have to pay property tax, then you need some form of money. I'm not saying you don't need money, except in a very limited, you guys have to listen to the words I'm using. When I say you don't need money, I'm saying a person to live does not need money. Food can be brought out of the ground. If there were no other people alive, you could live if you had the skills without money. You don't need money. Money has come about in this late day corporate system because of the corruptions that were brought in by the same statists who now want to send us all into socialism and communism. All right? We ought not to have to pay property tax. It's immoral. This is what happens is people get into this loop and they're like, well, what about property taxes? Well, yeah, there are corrupting. If I have a neighbor that comes over every 5 days and holds a gun to my head, and forces me to take cocaine and takes $500 from me, I could sit there and say, I have to have $500 because I got a neighbor who comes over with a gun and he's going to shoot me. Of course, then you have to have it. That doesn't mean guys with guns forcing you to give them $500 is needful in the system, or that you would die if you didn't have it. So yes, we have property taxes. Yes, our system has devolved into a system that idolizes money and requires it. Up until now, that money has been able to be gotten in ways that are not particularly tracked and not particularly owned by others. So somebody who had gold, I could go work for them and they could pay me in gold. The government didn't have to know about it or anything else. With what's going on right now with COVID and everything else, I said it. I shouldn't even have said it. They're going to do away with cash. When they do away with cash, all of that's over. The old days of you being able to exchange the lives and minutes and seconds of your life for the lives and minutes and seconds for somebody else's life, that's what money represents, by the way. Those days are going to be over. Every single transaction will have a great sucking sound of a percentage of it being sucked away from you, a larger and larger percentage. So this has just been a lesson. Money, if you want to boil it down, is the quantification of the hours and the minutes and the seconds of your life. You go to a place, wherever your cubicle is, where you peck on dots, and they pay you for those hours and minutes and seconds of your life, and those representations are then currency that are used in the system. Well, Mike, I just said that. I think you came in, maybe your comment just posted, but I just got done talking about digital currency for the last 5 minutes. Maybe you came in late. So that's where we are. If you have any questions or comments, I've got a few more minutes. It's 50 minutes in and I got to get ready to go. The book is going to be coming out any time now, any day now. God in the Storm. You definitely want to get that. We're going to be making some announcements on CleanVid, on the ad blocker, which is going to be fantastic. Some of you right here are going to get that beta version of CleanVid for free. I would ask you, and oh, by the way, I want to thank, I think 2 or 3 people in the last 3 days have gotten on to michaelbunker.com. They've gone up right about here and clicked on partner with Michael on michaelbunker.com, and they've gone down and they've made $5 donations. I think one of them was $10. Appreciate you guys doing that. Why? Because I need money. Need money so I can get batteries so that I can do more of these and I don't have to rob Peter to play Paul. All right, y'all. Looks like that's it. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, I appreciate you. I'm here for you. God bless you all. Go to michaelbunker.com. And I also want you to subscribe. If you're on Facebook, go to YouTube and subscribe. Hit the like button. Hit the little bell next to the subscribe button so you get all the notifications. God bless y'all. I love you. Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow. If not that, maybe the next day. We'll see.